COP28 Six Themes. It's all about the money. Theme number 2, delivering on promises made to the developing world. Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society, and I'd like to invite you to join me to walk through part 2 of our 6-part series on COP28 themes, and this will give you some idea of the implications of what COP decisions will mean for you. Of course, COP refers to the big climate conference going on in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. It's the conference of the parties, the countries that signed on to the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, back in 1994. And so this is the 28th time that they've met, and every time they meet they promise to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And every time they meet, the emissions go up the year after. So let's continue with the presentation here. See what Robert Lyman has found for us. So Robert Lyman prepared the text, and I'm just going to read it to you. So the 6 themes of COP28, the first part we did already, stimulating a course correction for climate action. Today we're going to talk about delivering on promises made to the developing world, and you can see that there are 4 more items that I'll be presenting to you. Delivering on promises made to the developing world. Here you can see at COP27, everyone was ecstatic that 2 weeks of extensive negotiations concluded with a hallmark implementation plan and a historic deal for loss and damage funding. So what does that mean? Well, the goal of this conference will seek to operationalize the Loss and Damages Fund that was approved in principle at COP27. Elicit voluntary pledges of money, of course, and seek longer-term financial pledges. It will complain that the goal of having Annex II countries, which are mainly the OECD developed countries, provide at least $100 billion in climate aid per year in the pre-2025 period still has not been met. It will also seek some degree of agreement on the level of the post-2025 climate aid commitment, hoping for at least $1.4 trillion per year. That's your tax money we're talking about here. And how much is $1 trillion? Well, that's a good question. If you look here, you can see this is the size of $1 million if it were in packets of $10,000 made up of $100 bills. And then it's extrapolated to show you 100 million, what a billion of those same packets would look like, and here's $1 trillion, and you can see the poor little taxpayer is pretty much disappearing under the burden of this debt. Robert Lyman also wrote an article this week, which was published in the Financial Post, talking about these big numbers. Now, he pointed out that it's very difficult for ordinary people to grasp the magnitude of these numbers. Neuroscience tells us the human brain is very bad at interpreting large numbers. Most people know that a billion or a million, billion, and trillion are all big numbers, but they can't really understand what the difference is between them. So if you think back to the visualization I just showed you, the answer is it's big. So a million seconds is 12 days. A billion seconds is 31 years. A trillion seconds is 31,688 years, which is a lot more than 12 days. So, that gives you some sense of how money demands are escalating at this climate conference. So as to the factual background, the developed countries' commitment to fund the climate mitigation, that means to reduce or prevent climate change, and adaptation activities, and that means to adapt, like building dikes for floods or encroaching sea level rise. So the country's commitment to fund the climate mitigation and adaptation activities of the developing countries by up to 100 billion per year, started in 2020, has not been met. Although the 2022 funding reportedly reached 70 billion per year, there have been several problems with the management and operation of the Global Green Climate Fund, notably because of a requirement that all projects be unanimously approved and the shortage of viable projects. So if you want a bit of background on that, have a look at Robert Lyman's 2015 report, which he called Who Cuts, Who Pays, Show Me the Money. And in principle, that's what the whole essence of these climate conferences have been about. Yes, it is all about the money. Over the past 3 years, the developing countries have increased their demands for climate aid. They want at least 1.3 trillion for climate mitigation every year from 2026 to 2030, with more beyond then. They want 600 billion per year to help them adapt to climate change. At COP27 last year in Egypt, they also demanded compensation for past and loss and damages resulting from historic emissions. In other words, every time there's a severe weather event in a developing country, Canada and other wealthier countries would be sent the bill for damages, and this compensation would be virtually unlimited. Save the planet! Give me the money! In 2022, the wealthier countries gave US dollars 204 billion in official development assistance or foreign aid for economic development. To meet the developing countries' demands for climate aid would mean increasing total foreign aid more than 10 times. And in Robert's view, the wealthier countries will never agree to pay so much. What are the prospects for these things being negotiated? Well, here's what Robert wrote. The developing countries and the non-governmental organizations, that's like all the big environmental groups, attending the conference will engage in grand theater, trying to make the case that the developed countries should pay enormous amounts in climate aid, and the media will play this up as a matter of climate justice. The media will provide little to no information about what the costs to the wealthier countries would be. No attention will be given to the fact that China is not being asked to contribute to the funding, and in fact would probably qualify as a recipient. Now, here I just want to pause and make a comment. When the UNFCCC framework was set up back in 1994, at that time China really was a developing nation. It was a very poor country, very underdeveloped. And of course now it has fabulous modern cities like Shanghai. It's done wonders in that time frame. But it's no longer really a developing nation. It's running neck and neck with the United States of America for one of the world's industrial powers. So, it is something to think about, that because it's still classified according to the original UNFCCC context as a developing nation, China would be able to apply for this kind of loss and damages, for historic emissions, for all kinds of compensation, and would never have to pay into the fund. So that's something to think about. And of course, not every country has oil revenues. So here's an idea of how they're going to raise this money. These people at these conferences just come up with ideas of, why don't we pick your pocket? Looks like you have money. So here's Fiona Harvey. Former world leaders led by Gordon Brown seek $25 billion levy on oil states' revenues to pay for climate loss and damage and other development aid at COP28. So Robert doesn't really think there'll be a rational resolution to this, but the conference will therefore focus on the proposed process for operationalizing the Loss and Damages Fund. The problems in doing so will be immense. For example, there will be no agreement on which countries should pay and how much they should pay, or on which countries will qualify to receive payments or how much they'll qualify to receive. There'll be no agreement on which extreme weather events are caused by human-related greenhouse gas emissions and which are not. And ultimately, the EU and some countries, including Canada, will agree to make voluntary contributions to the Loss and Damages Fund. The conference will agree to turn the enormously complicated design issues over to a technical subcommittee that will meet several times over the coming years with no realistic prospect to ever resolving the issues. So there's unlikely to be a rational resolution, but it's a fabulous winter vacay for climateers. Yes, here's the modern miracle in the desert. Here is Dubai. And here we have Catherine McKenna from COP27 meeting up with Amarjeet Sohi, the mayor of Edmonton. There they are on their way to save the planet, flying at that time to Sharm el Sheikh. And will Old Faithful, what's a COP, Catherine McKenna be there? And I make that little joke there because in 2017, Catherine McKenna addressed the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, and she told us that in 2015, she had just been elected and was sent off to the COP conference, and she didn't even know what COP meant. But nonetheless, she went in there and negotiated an ambitious deal for Canada, and now the rubber had to hit the road. Well, I think most of you are suffering from rubber hitting the road every single day because of that negotiated agreement that she made, knowing absolutely nothing about climate change negotiations and conferences. But she'll probably be there. Now, here's some observation I just pulled off Twitter, which really shows the hypocrisy of the event. This person said COP28 about to take place in one of the hottest places at this time of the year in Dubai. So imagine the air conditioning will probably be turned way up. 70,000 attendees, thousands of private jets and a few motorcades for the richest, most carbon-hungry individuals on Earth to tell the poorest people they are destroying the planet. Priceless. And over here, Alexander Marshall saying, it's amazing how profitable the end of the world has become. Presently, climate change is the money tree of the apocalypse. Some say it will cost $62 trillion to transition to renewable energy, and you can be sure they will be at COP28 begging for cash. So that's a great article on The Spectator out of Australia. So stay tuned for more. We've done 2 parts now. We'll be doing phasing out fossil fuels next. And if you found this useful and informative, we'd love to have a donation. Help us continue this work. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching this, and hope you'll find these informative because, you know, sometimes it seems like, oh, it's just another climate conference on the other side of the world. What do I care about what they say and do, those nutters? But everything they say and do will ultimately affect you. This is where the carbon tax comes from, the clean fuel standard, the clean electricity standard, all these very draconian regulations that are being imposed upon you have their roots in this conference and the preceding 27 of them. So that's why we're doing this, to help inform the general public about the implications of these themes that 70,000 people in the world and all the world media are going to be nonstop pumping into your head for the next 2 weeks. But you know, actually, most of the people at these events, especially the ENGO sector, you never elected them. They are not accountable to you. And they're transnational organizations that are making their own plans very far and distant from your sovereign nation. So, you know, feel free to dissent, because that's your right. You're the taxpayer. These guys are coming for your money. So thanks for watching. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling.